And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
I am incredibly grateful to God for saving me and bringing me to this church. In 2013, a very long series of poor choices finally caught up with me and left me in a place where I was absolutely convinced the world, and especially my kids, would be better off if I was dead. I was moments away from taking my life when I said out loud, almost involuntarily, "God, I need your help." A few minutes later, my son called to talk, and then my daughter got on the phone and said she had been distraught all day because she had a dream where I said I was leaving, but would not tell her where I was going. That really tore at me, and I told her everything was okay. I got off the phone and thanked God, and tried to figure out where to go next. But then I woke the next morning feeling once again that everything would be better for those I knew if I was dead. So then I sat on the couch and I once again asked God for help. Almost as soon as I was done saying it, a squirrel jumped onto the window screen to the left of me, and a blackbird jumped onto the window screen on the right. And for the next 20 minutes, they looked at me. And at first I was shocked, and then I just laughed. I knew there was no way that was coincidental. I knew I wasn't going to need a third try. Whatever God needed me for, I was here to do. And within 2 weeks, I was here in Plainfield. And now, all these years later, every single day, I'm so grateful to be alive and useful and working for His glory. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry from California, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the readings. And thank you to the Plainfield Christian Science Church for your courage to become independent and for the correct teachings of Christian Science. I always thought that I had been raised in Christian Science. Since finding your church, I know now what being raised in Christian Science really feels like. In Science and Health, page 322, Mary Baker Eddy writes, "The sharp experiences of belief in the supposititious life of matter, as well as our disappointments and ceaseless woes, turn us, like tired children, to the arms of divine love. Then we begin to learn life in divine science. Over many years, I have felt the sharp experiences of belief in the supposititious life of matter, as well as my disappointments and ceaseless woes, turning me like a tired child. But I had never truly felt the arms of divine love, teaching me life in divine science, until I found your church. Divine love, the key ingredient, was what seemed to be hidden, and the correct teachings of Christian Science, along with the love and humility of your church, and all you freely give of yourselves and your website, is what brought divine love to light, and is now helping me and all to really be raised in the truest sense in Christian Science. And I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Early last month, my son, who's away at college, was having a conversation with my husband, which led to my son getting angry and defensive and saying he didn't want to talk to him for a while. My husband was listing some possible options for him about a situation. They were all very matter-of-fact options, and we just couldn't understand what set him off. His reaction was so sudden and troubling that it made both my husband and I ponder what had triggered it. It also led my husband to become resentful, hurt, and angry, and to suggest that my son would be sorry if he was going to continue with no communication. I seemed to be the intermediary and asked my son why he was acting this way, but I couldn't get a straight answer. He was acting like a victim and blaming my husband for something, and his behavior started to eat at me as well, so I knew I needed to change my thought. I was working with the idea that my son is in his right place and that God's love governs him. I was led to text him a Bible verse from Psalms that I love, which is, "The Lord will perfect that which concerneth me." And I texted him that he could apply it to himself, and it is a law as long as he acknowledges God and applies it. I didn't get a response, but I had been calling him each Sunday evening, since that was the best time to check in. It was a late call, and as we chatted, I just got a sense of love with a capital L, and that there was no reason for me or my husband to take offense. The next morning, I told my husband that I had spoken to him and that he was dealing with some stressful experiences and that we just had to love him, even though it might meet no return. We just couldn't take it personally. And from that moment, I could feel a lifting of this personal sense by both of us. Well, last Sunday when I called my son, we chatted for a while, and then he asked, "How's Dad? I haven't spoken to him in a month." I said he'd love to hear from you. And my son said, "Okay, I'll call him now." A few minutes later, my husband's phone rang, and they picked up the conversation as though nothing had ever happened. I'm grateful for this because it showed it was our thoughts that needed to be changed, as my practitioner tells me all the time. And once we let go of the worry and resentment over my son's actions, we felt a sense of peace. And it also shows the truth of the statement in the spiritual interpretation of the Lord's Prayer. And love is reflected in love. I also want to just add that this past weekend, we had lunch with a couple we've known for a while, and the wife expressed to us that she and her son's wife had a falling out about 5 years ago over something very trivial. And though she's tried to amend the relationship, both sides have not been able to come together. It was clear in the conversation that she was resentful of how she'd been treated. And my husband said to her, "You just need to express your love to both." He suggested to text them and say, quote, "It doesn't matter what happened in the past. I love you and always will," end quote, and leave it at that. And she said, "I'm going to try that." I'm very grateful for all the teaching and practitioner support here at Plainfield. And thank you, Florence, for your very comforting readings tonight.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Yesterday, I was feeling a great sense of discouragement and couldn't seem to shake it. Then I recalled something I had read in Essays and Other Footprints by Mrs. Eddy. Quote, "Discouragement is impatience, haste to tread where we have not conquered, to occupy a place we have not proven our fitness to fill. Impatience is doubt, doubt of God's willingness to help us, doubt of his presence and power, doubt of his love when we are told God is love," end quote. When I first read this, I didn't really think it applied to me. But after calling the practitioner, even though I didn't speak of this, the truth she gave me helped me to see something that I needed to see. It came to me clearly that I was being impatient, unwilling to learn the lessons that God was giving me at the pace he was giving them to me. This discouragement wasn't the pitiful little error it seemed to be, but willful disobedience and lack of trust in God. Once I saw the discouragement for what it really was, it left. This morning, I randomly opened to Watch's Prayers and Arguments by Mary Baker Eddy and read, "Hold on and persist for good, because there never is a hopeless situation. When error meets with resistance, it begins to be scattered. Where a situation seems unbearable, it is because error is letting go. I am so grateful for these books of Mrs. Eddy's writings that we have, for the lessons they teach us, and for the practitioner who is helping me learn them. And I'm grateful to be learning them in the midst of all this love here. Thank you so much for this service, and thank you, Florence, for those beautiful readings.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight and the beautiful organ music. I want to express my gratitude tonight for healing of severe seasonal allergies. I had great difficulty in finding any kind of relief, and at times I could barely function or even leave the house. Years before that, I had stopped using some medications because of the side effects. When I came to the Plainfield Church, I started working with a practitioner here who prays with you when you call for help. She had been helping me with different things at work, with my relationships, and during this time, I had healing of flu, reoccurring colds, and an injury from a fall, and a couple of other things. So she was teaching me during this time about God's love and care for His creation. I was gaining a new appreciation for the seasons and letting go of many old fears and baggage. I was also gaining new views of God's goodness and present help. She prayed with me about the allergies. It has been several years, and I have never had a return of not one of the symptoms, and now enjoy things during these seasons I once dreaded. I'm very grateful for all that I'm learning here. Christ Jesus' teachings, Mrs. Eddy's sacrifice, and all that she brought to give us this science, and this church that knows how to teach it and live it. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. Several months back, I twisted my back in bed in an awkward way and apparently did something involving one of my ribs. I was working regularly with a Plainfield practitioner at the time, and she took up this challenge specifically. There was quite a bit of discomfort, pain really. I especially didn't want to sneeze or cough and had trouble sleeping. This was not a quick healing, certainly weeks, and I don't know that I ever even acknowledged it, so natural was it. But even during the process, I was grateful for the spiritual growth that was going on, especially more discipline over my thinking. At some point, I realized that the pain was completely gone with not a vestige of discomfort left. And so, belated thanks to God, to the practitioner, and to Plainfield for the many study aids I would have been using at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Bruce, and I'd like to thank Florence for these wonderful readings that were given tonight. And I've always been impressed with the story of Asa. He appeared before an enemy that had countless thousands, and his army was just a few hundred. And yet he had the confidence to pray to his God and say, "It is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power." In a way, this story resonates with me as well, because there was a time in my life when it just felt like anything and everything that was out there in this world was there to fight me. And I was really in a very low point and had a great need. And it was with the grace of God that I was brought here to Plainfield, to the Plainfield Church, where many things have been healed, resolved, restored. I must say that I didn't have the confidence of Asa to say, "It's nothing with you, God, to help, whether with many or with them that have no power." But I will say that I found something here in the Plainfield Church, specifically with our practitioner who was here at the time, who did have this confidence. Not only that, this confidence was very strong, that God's goodness could heal, could restore, could provide whatever was needed, whatever the need was. And this was a strong conviction, like I have never seen anywhere else. And it did indeed prove true. Many things were healed, many things were restored, many things were redeemed. And this is the power of God. So I'm thanking God that He brought me here to this church to find out how good He is, how strong and good He is. So thanks for Mary Baker Eddy for Christian Science and this Plainfield Church where it's still going on. Chardell.
I want to thank you tonight for this service, for the readings and our beautiful music. And I want to say how a time when God is always helping me, and I'm learning that with practitioner help. And a time last year, I've talked about this before, but I think it's worth repeating again because we're on the highway a lot, and sometimes I think about this, we're always safe. Well, I got in my car to go to town, and after prayer, and when I started out, I didn't think anything about how the car was handling, and it stopped. And I looked at it, said it was empty and gas, and I thought, well, that can't be true. But I tried to start it again, and started up a little bit, and I thought, well, I guess I asked God for help. And then I thought, I'm just going to keep going and go get some help down where my mechanic is. And I was able to get up to a spot, praying all the way, and I wasn't afraid. And that's one of the things I've been working with the practitioner, to give up this sense of false fears and foes that aren't real. So I started up I got to the top, and I was able to start it up again, and there was a green light, and I was able to, in our town, it's not a real steep grade, but it is a slope, and I was able to coast miraculously through 4 green lights, and I pulled over and started it again. I thought, I'm almost there, and I felt fine about it. Never gave up, and got to the gas station where it stopped cold. And I got out, a man got in, and 2 other men pushed my car into a safe place. To be learning about God's help and protection, no matter where you are and what you're doing, is a very wonderful thing. And I never knew that until I came here to Plainfield Church. So I'm very grateful, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Hi. Years ago, when I went into the Navy, I took an audition on 2 instruments to be a Navy musician. I did not pass on the instrument which I really wanted, which was the drums. Needless to say, I was pretty disappointed and asked the practitioner in this church for help. She said she would pray and that God had a good plan for me. Well, when I got my orders to report to boot camp, I was told to bring my drumsticks for an audition. No mention was made of the first audition or of the second instrument that I had already passed on. It was like the whole thing never happened. When I got there, I passed the second audition on the drums and went on to spend 8 successful years in the Navy playing drums in various bands. Needless to say, I was really grateful for the way it all worked out, for the help of that practitioner. It was a minor miracle, I would say. God is good, and I'm grateful to be a member of this church for Christian Science and for everything that I'm learning here. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm grateful tonight for learning in this church that there is a law of God that governs everything in his universe, a law of good. And that if we will acknowledge and then strive to live in accordance with that law, we will have a healthy and a fulfilling life. There's a statement in Science and Health, our textbook, which I love, that says, truth, life, and love are a law of annihilation to everything unlike themselves, because they declare nothing except God. There's the law. Well, Jesus knew that divine truth, life, and love were a law of God, and that's how he healed. And that's how Christian Science heals. And there's a statement in the Bible that says that the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law, so-called, of sin, disease, and death. I've been healed of many things in Christian Science, often with the help of a practitioner from this church. And with every healing, I have found a greater sense of the presence and the power of God and the law that God is. And I've also found greater confidence in our authority over sin, disease, and death. And that is the lack of fear that it was spoken of by others. When you know your authority over sin, disease, and death, you become less and less fearful of anything. It's a liberating, wonderful way of life, knowing that no matter what problem you might have to face, there is a law of God that will see you through. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy, for discovering this science of Christianity, this law of God, law of good, and for persevering in giving it to mankind. Florence, thank you very much for those readings tonight. It's so good to be here with you all.
Thank you. Ingrid from California, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you so much for all your dedication and for sharing with all of us. It is just amazing being always in your teleconference and being able to see an amazing website and learn so much from it. Thank you so much to all of you. I just want to express gratitude for God's blessings every day, every minute, all the time. And I know this is for everyone. And also, with so much help that I get for my work here with the houseless in Los Angeles, just amazing. The love, the protection, the guidance, just everything. I'm always amazed. Always say, "Oh God, you're so amazing," and especially about that great article, "Ways That Are Vain," just helps me all the time to realize about things that I might have not realized and that are important, or that can even be a small thing, but is going to have a lot of effect in the work. Just very grateful for all the teachings about animal magnetism, or as I respectfully call it, unreal magnetism, and it always reminds me that it's unreal. It's a big big blessing that God gave me that inspiration. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for everything that I've learned, all the truth that I've learned that helped me continue in the truth that I am not of myself. I am never alone, always in the presence of God. This truth really does help me begin with who I really am, that spiritual image and likeness of God. And it helps the continuing realization of the truth of my freedom. I'm so grateful for a very simple sentence I learned at the top of a poem. It simply said, to be ever conscious of my unity with God. I have kept this with me because it really helps me. Every time thought likes to go some in wrong directions, the simple truth reminds me of that indestructible unity with God. Listening to a lecture recently, I've listened to it before, years ago. It has something in it so beautiful. It's by Daniel Jensen, his lecture titled Begin Rightly. He reminds us that Mrs. Eddy told us to look for her in her writings. And he said that he himself, when he picked up the books, he thinks to himself, I am coming in for a visit with my dearest friend. I found that so beautiful. What a beautiful thought to begin with when we read her works. It affirms that we can find her right there, so close, so near, so powerful a presence to help us on our way. On page 120 of Miscellany, Mrs. Eddy says, those who look for me in person or elsewhere than in my writings lose me instead of find me. I hope and trust that you and I may meet in truth and know each other there and know as we are known of God. I find that so powerful. What a wonderful way to be clear that our help is near. Our true helper is here. And this help is what is leading us all out of the darkness of our so-called troubles into the freedom that God alone can give and has given us. So grateful for all the testimonies. Wonderful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
A few things to read from the website bulletin board, actually from last week, that I didn't get to. And they're from Florida. I just finished reading from cover to cover the beautiful September issue of Love is the Liberator. It is a magnificent testimony to the love for Mrs. Eddy and her Christian Science that this church expresses and lives. I especially loved reading about the Carpenters and the history of how they faithfully preserved Mrs. Eddy's teaching and demonstrations for us today. This magazine is truly what Mrs. Eddy envisioned to spread her science. Thank you so much for all the prayerful work that goes into it. And then, in reading We Knew Mary Baker Eddy, 3rd series, I am so thankful for the specific instructions Mrs. Eddy shared with her students. In a letter to Calvin Hill, she wrote, we never can know who is in reality a Christian Scientist until he is tested under fire. Then what is left are the dregs, unfit for use, till purged and purified. Or they are qualities that evil cannot destroy and are held by the power of God. On one occasion, Mrs. Eddy said to him in substance, the first thing I do in the morning when I awake is to declare I shall have no other mind before the divine mind, and become fully conscious of this, and adhere to it throughout the day the entire day. Then evil cannot touch me. Many times she said to him, all my hours are his. Thank you for the inspirational roundtable meeting last Monday. This seems to fit in with the discussion on persistent testing that is part of the process of healing. I especially like the story about the young woman who entered a room full of beautiful flowers and came out an old decrepit woman. Lured by the irresistible fragrance and beauty of the roses, she had ignored the inner voice warning her not to enter. What a great metaphor for all the things that tempt us to be self-serving and forget to be a light unto others, and to listen and obey to God's word. And then, wow. Thank you, Jared and the chorus, for that rousing solo. The church is certainly letting its light shine and being a beacon of love and truth to all mankind. Thank you so much for such a beautiful service this morning. And then this is a testimony from California. I thank God for Christian Science and a healing I recently experienced. About 3 weeks ago, I found myself very ill and ended up hospitalized. I contacted a Plainfield practitioner who gave me some wonderful thoughts and things to work with and told me that she would pray with me. I began to study Science and Health and other articles provided by the Plainfield website. I thank God because I feel great now and because I have a different understanding of healing. I am very happy, expecting a different kind of experience. Words cannot explain the peace and joy I am experiencing these days, and I thank God for this. Christian Science always takes us up higher, so we are healed not only physically, but spiritually and morally. I am so appreciative of Plainfield's generosity for providing so much beneficial information, and I am so appreciative of the practitioner's support. Thank you so much, and I wish everyone a blessed evening. And then from England, I'm very grateful for the roundtable this past weekend, and my heart goes out to that dear man whose letter you read to us and who had such a difficult experience when growing up. It is so lovely to know that now that he has found our church, his life and his health and all things are improving. Thank you so much for the blessed group, or for the group singing of Blessed Quietness. It was a very different arrangement than the version I had previously heard, but it was still very beautiful. I hope the group enjoyed performing it. As it's an American, and I believe fairly old, there is a chance that Mrs. Eddy knew it too. I was amazed to hear that you have plans to translate even into more languages, such as Farsi, and I do wish you well with that. Much love to everyone. That was England. And then the last is Kansas City. To my dear friends at Plainfield, you are all a blessing to the world as you continue in performing God's work on earth. I am so grateful we found each other. May the, quote, dews of divine science blossom into greater freedom for the world through your ongoing dedication. And that was a quote from Retrospection and Introspection by Mrs. Eddy. Yours in Science. I'm so grateful to be here tonight to hear those beautiful readings, our beautiful music, and those testimonies. I can relate to almost all of them, if not all of them. The one from the woman in California who said how hard it was for her to learn that God is love. It is a quote that we all kind of know. It's certainly a quote I have said to myself often, but there was a time in my life too where I struggled to understand that. I could sort of know the words, but I couldn't really feel that. And I did, as she did, I learned here how to experience that feeling that God is love. and that we are never alone. His presence and power are always with us, and we can always call out to him in times of need or trouble. One thing that helped me the most, I would say, in getting an appreciation of knowing God's love for me was to slow down and to acknowledge his presence, to start to be grateful for all the good that he bestows on me and on us all. I realized I had taken so much for granted, and my mind was always dwelling on what was wrong or what I perceived to be wrong, rather than what was right and all the good that was ever at hand, if I only had the eyes to see it. And so, as I developed that gratitude more and more earnestly, I began to see, yes, it is true, God is love. He's bestowing his love on all of his creation, every moment of every day. And if we could just slow down and realize it and feel that presence and power, our day would be such a wonderful experience, because it would be in his presence, as it always is. Whether we are acknowledging it or not, it always is. So I'm grateful for these wonderful lessons I've learned in science, Christian Science, which is truly not necessarily a religion, as Gary was brought out in his testimony, but it's the rules and the laws of the universe, and they can be applied by anyone, anywhere. I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.